Family businesses can be difficult and complex at the best of times, and nobody knows this better than my next guest, Shawn Johal. Shawn is the co-founder of Dahl's Lighting, an LED lighting business which was born from the ashes of a collapsed, listed entity that he worked in and his father-in-law had built. Shawn's story twists and turns into a celebrated success that led him to write his new book, The Happy Leader. My name is Nick Haralambis, and I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. So remember, it's not over until it's over. Okay, Shawn, welcome to the show. It's not over. We are here to talk about, in this one, possibly 2 near-death business experiences. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Nick. I'm super excited and everything's fantastic.
Oh, that's great. Your voice is so crisp and full. It makes for easy listening. So let's dive right in and give me some context. What business are we talking about? What does it do? How does it make money? And where are you positioned in this business?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're going to talk about the LED lighting business. I have a few different businesses. One's a coaching practice, but today we're going to talk specifically about the LED lighting business. We're based out of North America, based out of Montreal, Canada, have about 50 employees, have offices out of Florida as well. We basically make LED lighting for the residential market, selling to, companies like Home Depot and a lot of big lighting showrooms and distributors.
Awesome. And you can talk as comfortably as you want about like revenue and stuff, but how big is the business in terms of turnover? Like, what can you share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a mid 8-figure business that we basically grew from the ground up. We came out of a family bankruptcy, so it was an interesting story, which we'll get into. The interesting tidbit about our business, I think I'll give you 2 pieces of information which are quite unique for us. Number one is that we've never had a month in the red, which is, I think, rare for most businesses. So that's one interesting element. And number 2, that we changed, I calculate 87% of the team over 5 years.
Wow. That's crazy. So how old is the business now?
Now we're going on year 12.
Wow. Okay, great. And you've said we a few times. Who's the we in this equation?
Yeah, so my brother-in-law, who's also my business partner.
Okay, so the familial thing we can talk about too. There's so much to unpack here. It's fantastic. Okay, so we're talking about LED lighting. You sell to residentials. That's the core business. Do you manufacture yourself, or do you have suppliers that you buy from? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Nick. So we do consider ourselves a manufacturer. We're not doing much local manufacturing here in Canada. We do get our products overseas. However, the big difference between us and the distributor is that we do all of our entire own design, engineering, and certifications and tooling. So meaning, any product that we do, we're designing it from the scratch, ground up. We're fully engineering the way it's made, and then we're taking it overseas thereafter, proprietary technology, proprietary suppliers, and then getting our own certification. So there's nothing that's off the shelf.
Okay. And shipping globally or a very localized business?
It's very much localized to North America. We pretty much hit up everything that's Canada and the US. At one point, we had aspirations to be a global company, and then we realized we only wanted that aspiration because we like traveling. There's actually no reason for us to leave the North American market, considering it's multi-billion-dollar market. So
yeah, and physical retail versus e-commerce, wholesale versus direct-to-consumer. How does that look?
It's really another great question. We're very B2B, so we're very focused on selling directly to other businesses. We've gotten a little bit into B2C. We have some e-commerce partners that we work with like Amazon and a few others, but we've come to realize that our strength is really working through people who are already well-established, companies that are already well-established, such as like a Home Depot and such as a lighting showroom or distributor that's doing well already.
Okay, that all makes sense to me. So now the moment we've all been waiting for, let's talk about this near-death business experience. So maybe set the scene for us and then talk about the moments.
Absolutely. So there's going to be 2 of them today, which I'm sure some entrepreneurs have gone through more than one. Yeah. I do consider them both near death. So the first one comes that when I started my entrepreneurial career, we joined the family business, and my father-in-law had started a lighting business that was publicly traded. He actually took a bankrupt company and put it on the TSX stock exchange, which is incredibly strange, and no one to this day knows how he took a bankrupt company and put on the stock market. But he found a way to do it, and then he started raising funds, and he started raising millions of dollars to buy companies, and he bought 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different companies, and he brought that business to 50 million in revenue. And so that 50 million that he brought into there was purely based on mergers and acquisition. I'm talking zero organic growth. Okay. Wow. Just to be clear here, so he'd buy companies and then would add on to the revenue, and then buy more companies and add on to the revenue. The big problem was that he was creating a monster head office, right? So you think about this, Nick, you're buying these successful, profitable companies that have sales teams and engineering teams and accounting teams, but then you're building this head office. And this head office now has a VP finance. This head office now has a VP marketing. This finance now has a VP sales. Where are all these people coming from? Who's paying for them, right? You're taking profits from these subsidiary divisions to fund your head office. And the thing is, the synergies weren't big enough for it to actually make sense financially. What would have been smarter is to maybe have a brain trust at this head office, small group of really smart people, and then let these companies just run and grow organically on their own. That wasn't the vision. And that ended up catching up to us very, very badly. So the first experience is actually more of a death experience, not really near death. So what ended up happening, unfortunately, was that, from the 2006 timeframe, a company was bought within the organization that we really shouldn't have bought. It was a company that didn't have any synergies. No one really liked this business, but my father-in-law saw some really good opportunities financially, thought it made sense, brought the business on board. And then for those of the listeners who are old enough to remember, there was a massive recession in 2006 and 2007 that started. And then all of a sudden, all of the weaknesses of our $50 million business were very, very apparent very quickly because we didn't have a solid foundation as a business. We didn't have cash reserves. We did not have, the right structure in place. We weren't profitable enough. And so the business came crashing down. It was quite spectacular within 18 months. So from middle of 2006 to 2008, the entire business came to a screeching halt. And literally everything fell apart at the seams, all of the weaknesses exposed. And the business went from 50 million down to, I won't say nothing, but literally like from 50 to like under 10 in terms of value and in terms of what was happening within that business. Devastating for the family. I remember sitting at a desk and I was sitting with my brother-in-law, my father-in-law, and the three of us, all we were doing, we were calculating, okay, do we have enough funds to buy this material, to make this product, to sell to this client, to get paid? And there's like a triangle of just trying to like get enough material to pay, to get the next order shipped out, to get the next payment, to pay for the next supplier who was upset. We did that for about a year. I remember one of the worst years of my life, to be honest with you.
The cash flow shuffle.
Cash flow shuffle, that's all it was, cash flow inventory shuffle. And it didn't work ultimately in the end. And so it's not a full death experience because that's when we had an opportunity, my brother-in-law and I, to buy back 3 divisions, 10 cents on a dollar, because it was such a mess. No one could have got in there and fixed it. It would have all just gone bankrupt. And so we made a deal to say, let's just buy back some of the inventory and assets. We're not going to be able to buy back, obviously, the entire, all the divisions, but we'll buy back 3 divisions and relaunch under our new business, which is called Dal's Lighting, which has been going strong for 12 years.
Okay. Wow. What a story. So let's go back to the beginning of that story and tell me what the different roles are in this listed company. So am I correct that at this point you're acquiring businesses, you're still listed, and each of those businesses' teams, let's say you acquire a team of 10, they all get ingested into the head office. Now you've got multiple accountants, multiple salespeople, multiple everybody coming in. What is your role in this business, and your father-in-law and your brother-in-law? How does that look?
Yeah, absolutely. So my father-in-law was the CEO of the business. My brother-in-law was basically kind of like the head VP, executive VP, and I was the head of sales for the organization. And my mother-in-law was also an executive VP. So, there was really kind of the 3 of them at the top. I wasn't really part of that strategic team at that time, or part of the founder circle. I was really coming in a few years, 5 years later from their launch. And it wasn't so much absorbing. As a matter of fact, most of these companies were being left alone in terms of, okay, you're just going to continue to run out of your own place. You're going to stay there. We're not going to digest you or ingest you into this business. The problem actually was the fact of just adding so many resources that were not bringing ROI, right? What return on investment was the VP marketing bringing when you already had a head of marketing in that company? Where is that? Technically you almost would have had to fire one of those two people, right? So if you want to get rid of the head of marketing at the company that you bought, you keep the head office person who's going to run marketing centralized. That would have probably made more sense, but that wasn't the strategy, right? So it was flawed. It was a flawed strategy, which taught us everything, right? It's the only reason we've had any success later is what we learned from that experience.
And at this time, how old are you?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think back now. This was 2004, so everybody's gonna know my age at this point. But so I was 26.
Okay.
26 going into it, 20, 25, 26. Yeah.
And what experience do you have in the world of business, like feet on the ground, actual practical experience?
When I got into that business. So I was working for a company that most people will know globally called Rubbermaid. Most people know Rubbermaid. They make garbage cans, they make Sharpie pens, they make Levolor blinds. They're a pretty big company, $8 billion business. So I had gone into that company as a sales rep, which was actually a really cool job. They had us, servicing all the Home Depots across Canada. And then I became district manager. So then I was in charge of 14 other reps. So, I had always been a salesperson. Sales is my passion. I always loved selling and being able to manage 14 people. And Rubbermaid also, what was really amazing is that they sent us to these incredible leadership development programs, which is where my whole leadership passion came through later. And, why I wrote a book about it was really based on what I learned through those amazing leaders globally in Rubbermaid. So I was coming in with like more corporate, not zero entrepreneurial, 100% corporate mentality. I never, what's funny about me, Nick, is I've never had that entrepreneurial mindset. When I look back and you hear people with entrepreneur stories of, oh, I had this paper route, or I was like selling these things to kids at school, or I was like buying cards and resell, I never did any of that stuff. I just studied, played sports, and then got into the corporate world. My parents both worked at the same company. My mom worked 30 years at one company, my dad 35, and they're just like, just get a stable job. You'll get, you'll do well. You'll do well. Don't go out of the box with this,
Yeah.
So I never really had this mindset of being an entrepreneur, to be honest with you.
Which is interesting and adds to the complex layers of the story, because your father-in-law did something that a lot of people aspire to and struggle to do, which is build a holding company, acquire assets into that company, list it, and then have profit. Like, it seems like a good plan. So my question on that front is, how did he think of doing this, and where did he raise the money to go ahead and go forward?
Yeah, that's such a great story, and he's such a genius financially. My father-in-law, the way he pulled this off, it was really well structured. So he actually came from this company called Thomas and Betts, which was a massive lighting company, also globally, and he was a VP finance there, and they were doing this exact model. They were just going out there raising money, purchasing businesses, and making this merger and acquisition model. And they were trying to get to $1 billion. I think they got up to about 250 million, and they got acquired at that time. And again, he wasn't part of ownership, but he was a VP finance there. He saw that model and said, I can replicate this. This model works. It's viable. There's money in the market. So all we need to do is get this holding company on the TSX and then start selling it, right? Start selling the concept behind it. Buy our first company. Once we buy our first company, all the rest will follow. And it's true. It worked marvelously. He's an incredibly impressive salesperson. So he was able to go out there, sell, really, really well his vision to all the investors. And then when he bought those first two companies, things got serious. And then he bought a really, really nice local company, a company that still today is going strong and has a great reputation. That was like a signature purchase. When he got that, kind of like raising 7 million, buying that business, things really took off from there, where then there was a lot of belief in what he was doing.
Okay. And then the unraveling, financial crash. This is, if I'm not mistaken, the housing crash, like 2007-8. The bubble bursts and revenue just stops. People stop buying lighting because your addressable market is residential properties. They obviously aren't being sold or occupied or built anymore. So like, what happens? Do you sell off assets? Do you delist? What was the next step?
So one thing I do want to mention, and I think you'll know this, Nick, being an entrepreneur yourself, is that I don't think a recession should ever be a reason a business closes, right? Like, even during the pandemic, this has been another great example of it, because some businesses have thrived. Other businesses that have been in really tough industries, the best ones have still survived and have still found ways, to keep going, even if you're in like kind of restaurants or hotels. Not all of them have closed. So I think that we shouldn't use a recession or a pandemic or things like that to say, well, my business closed because of this reason. What happened when we look at the sequence of events? There is some bad luck, okay? And one of the really bad things that happened was that when he purchased that company in 2006, the last business was a large business, about $13 million business, the largest in the entire group. That business was selling to Home Depot. And what happened was Home Depot was doing a massive change with their SAP system. Okay, now we look at SAP and it's like, oh, SAP is amazing and it's easy to integrate. Well, it really, it was more kicking off and starting in those years, and people were just starting to integrate with it. And what happened was during an 18-month period, Home Depot bought 3 times too much inventory from this company, and they were the biggest client. And then 6 months into the deal, when the company's bought, recession's just starting now. And then Home Depot reaches out to the family and says, oh, by the way, we're turning off the taps. We can't buy anything from you for the next 18 months because we overbought on all the inventory. So that was right at the beginning. It had nothing even to do with the recession, really. It had to do with a huge systems mistake. So it's almost like you buy this company that's had 2 amazing years, but they're fake. It's not really amazing years,
Well, and it's fake, and it's not even their fault. They didn't cheat.
No.
They didn't lie in the due diligence. You did everything you needed to do, and the system just was wrong. That is brutal.
This is like the bad luck of bad lucks, right? But again, if you're a healthy company and you figure it out, you survive this. But then you combine that with a recession, you combine that with a head office that's, ballooning out of control. And, the business fundamentals were not there, Nick. I mean, okay. And, my father-in-law remains one of the closest people in my life. He's a mentor to me. We talk about this a lot. He's able to look back now and it took a while, but he's able to look back now and be honest about it. The business fundamentals were not there. And I don't care what kind of business you have. If there's one message for the audience, you have to get your fundamentals right. You have to make sure that your business is on strong footing. If you don't have that, any event can come in and just, wash you away.
I have been asked this question a lot and given the same advice for 10 years, and people think that I oversimplify the answer, but I have no doubt that you will agree. Doesn't matter what you do and doesn't matter how big you are, cash flow kills businesses. And cash flow is really a simple basic. That's it. It's the fundamentals. That's what made me trigger this thought is if you don't have the fundamentals right and you're not selling a good product to a good customer, then the cash isn't going to come and you can't pay your expenses. And then your business is over. Whether you are a $1 trillion Apple or you are just starting out, you need cash in the bank. So I completely understand how the combination of your biggest customer not reordering for 18 months and a recession coming in goes, holy crap, revenues are low. But the key thing for me here is revenues are low and your head office expenses are 4 or 5 times more than they should be, right? And that's then where this complexity comes in.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was a combination of those things happening. And then obviously you were talking about the way that the delisting happened. It doesn't happen like in the movies, let me tell you. It's even though it happened quickly, it's a very strange, slow burn, where the banking partners and the accounting partners start realizing things are not going right. And then they start trying to get involved, but then you're trying to save your business. So you're just trying to make sure that, the numbers and the ratios make sense. But, there's a lot of kind of going into those numbers and trying to see, okay, how can these, is this are these the real numbers, or how are we projecting these? How are we showing these? We've heard multiple stories of public companies, right? Like, are you really getting the true numbers of how that business is running? I think in 2022, there's a lot more rules around this now. I think, 15, 17 years ago, it wasn't the same. You didn't have those same type of, not as many anyway, as many as benchmarks and milestones and expectations. So, I think there was some lying to ourselves, also as a business, kind of just not acknowledging certain things the way they should have been acknowledged and facing the cold, hard truths of where the business was financially. And then, it was a very slow burn where then some partners started calling in their loans, right? They start saying, well, now you haven't paid us back our X loans. And, then shareholders are starting to get really uncomfortable and they're starting to say, hey, what's going on? The numbers are not projecting the way they were projecting before. And there were really high expectations for this. I mean, you could imagine in our own community how many people had bought shares and how many people had committed. There wasn't a lot at that time. The share was only worth about $1.20, but the expectation was this company was going to get to $1 billion and that these shares would be worth $100 or $1,000 one day, right? So it's kind of that craze of people wanting to get in on the action, and then the whole thing comes crashing down, and you have to answer to all these shareholders and family members and friends and suppliers and customers. I mean, it's really tests your resolve and your character as an individual.
And I mean, that's an interesting point for us to segue into this family business, because that is an interesting experience to go through with anybody, never mind with the people you sit at a dinner table with every night or on Sundays at family lunch. So what was it like? What was the stress, the tension, the interpersonal relationships? I mean, this is your wife's or your partner's family. So what was that like?
Yeah, it was my wife's family, and she was part of the business too at that time. So the whole thing was very, very kind of incestuous the way that thing was happening. It was really tough. The one thing I will say is that we are a very tight knit family. There was never any finger pointing. There was never any type of blame being shifted. There was always support for each other. To be honest with you, really, there wasn't that much infighting. It's funny, my brother-in-law and I, Joey, was a great entrepreneur. We talk about this a lot. It seems like there's more fights in family businesses when there's too much money, not when there's not enough money. It seems like when you're just struggling to survive and you're down in the depths of the war, and you're there and you're fighting for your survival, everyone kind of rallies and works together and does the best that they can to get through this, as opposed to when you see families making too much money, or someone's making too much money and someone's not making enough money and they feel they're entitled to more. That's usually when you see the blow-ups and the real fights happen. So I'm pretty proud of the way things happen in terms of the family dynamic. We really kept a close link. And my father-in-law was absolutely essential in helping us buy back the 3 divisions. He became incredibly selfless during those months and negotiating with the bank and kind of letting us get in there and relaunch the new business. Without him, really, he did help us a lot after, but he wasn't really part of the ownership of this new business. We couldn't be, right. It wouldn't have worked. So he was very, very important in making that happen. So I think, to be honest with you, I would say it's our family dynamic that allowed us to relaunch more so than have any struggle with it.
That's amazing. The thought that comes to mind when you talk about this is struggle seems to galvanize people where success seems to polarize people. And whether it's familial or just co-founders or whatever, when there is success involved, people want their share of the pie. When there is struggle involved, people want to build a pie, make a pie. So I like that way of looking at it. And I think it's quite unique. I mean, my family being of Greek and Cypriot descent, we also do the family thing a lot. I've luckily stayed out of it. But for my entire life, I've been like, this is a terrible idea. And for all my sins, I ended up hiring my mom in one of my previous businesses and actually had to fire her. We are still on very good terms and I love her dearly. But family businesses are hard. So I'm glad that none of you had to fire anybody. Okay, so things go bad. Shareholders are calling in loans. I'm interested in the day-to-day experience of this period, because on a high level, it sounds overwhelming, and I'm picturing movies where, there's shareholders knocking on your door, but it's much more insidious than that, right? It's every day somebody comes out of the woodwork, and this happens for 18 months. Like, what was an average day like for all of you at that point?
It was a total disaster. Like, honestly, there's no other way to say it.
Just
I'm
a disaster.
Someone it's a disaster. I mean, I'm the most positive. I have a diagnosed positivity bias. I'm literally like off the charts. It's not a good thing, by the way. That people might think I'm saying that to give myself a pat on the back. It's actually terrible to be on any extreme. The problem being with the positivity bias is that I have rose-colored glasses most of the time, and I'm absolutely oblivious to most blind spots. So I just kept thinking like, this will turn around. This will be great. But when every single phone call you're getting, especially when you're client facing, is an upset client, right? And these are people that I've built relationships with for 4 years now. I feel really close to these individuals, and they're calling me like, where's my shipment? Where's my product? Why isn't my order here? You promised me last week. You promised me the week before. And they can't serve their end user because we're B2B to C, so we're B2B. And, that to me was the hardest part, having to take these upset calls, some of which were very unpleasant, and deal with that. And then you think about, suppliers who you've built also strong relationships with, who you're not able to pay either, but they have goods that you need. So you're kind of trying to finagle your way and negotiate ways of getting these things. So it was just literally every single day was just negotiating with a lot of negative outcomes. There wasn't a lot of positive outcomes from that negotiation. So it's not like you're negotiating and winning deals or coming out on top. You'd be kind of selling a little bit more of your soul to the devil every single conversation. And then at one point, the whole thing just comes crashing down. And then when you relaunch, don't forget that now it's the same industry. So we relaunched in the same industry. Now we got to go back with our tail between our legs to go see all of these suppliers and all these customers. And now we're trying to make deals to relaunch with them, after we've just like given them 2 years of absolute horrendous service. So yeah, it was very, very, very energy consuming and difficult.
Thank you for sharing that. I can feel the pain. At that time, were you having these difficult conversations specifically with suppliers? Did you guys have an inkling that you might have to relaunch this business, or was it just like save everything we can, all hands on deck? Because that then informs how you talk to suppliers.
We had zero idea motivation to relaunch a business. Okay. So this story, which is again, I don't know if it's been changed over time in my memory, but this is the way I remember it. We had taken all the money we had left, second mortgages on my father-in-law's home and my brother-in-law's home, my home. We took second liens, any penny I had left, and we were about to put it all back into the existing business, the existing public business, to try to save it. And I still remember that we had to sign, and it was a very late signing. It was like a 10 o'clock at night signing, and literally at 9:45 p.m. And I was very naive, very, very, very stupid, to be honest with you. I didn't really thought it through. My father-in-law said we should put the money back in, and then, we'll save this business. Okay, let's do it. Okay, I guess that's the right thing to do. I'm listening to you. I trust him, right? My father-in-law is a financial guy. I'm kind of forgetting the last 2 years of the business falling apart. And I'm just like, okay, let's put this money back in. I have a pregnant wife, by the way, at this point with our first child. And I'm just like, not even like hesitating to put money back in. At 9:45 at night, he calls my brother-in-law and he says, and myself, and he says, guys, we cannot put the money back into this business. I'm looking at this. It's just going to suck the cash. It's going to be a vortex. It's just going to go to pay back some suppliers. And then we're still not going to make it. Hold your money. We'll figure things out.
Wow.
And so we ended up not putting money back into that business. It ended up crashing in the next couple of days, really falling apart. And honestly, that's the difference of kind of where I live today, of where God knows I'd be living, because that one single decision probably changed the entire course of my life. As a matter of fact, I think if we had made that wrong decision, I'm quite confident. I know this is wild to say this, Nick, but I'm quite confident I wouldn't ever have been an entrepreneur. I think I would have become a corporate. I ended up like a corporate VP or a president, somewhere maybe, but I don't think I ever would have owned a business.
Isn't it wild to be able to look back on your history and find a single pivotal decision that somebody else helped you make that defined the next 10 years of your life?
It's crazy. It really is crazy.
I mean, look, from the outside, what it says to me is your loyalty is just off the charts. I mean, your father-in-law must be one hell of a guy, because you were going to war. Regardless of what bullets were flying at you, you were going in. And the fact that he clearly had the wherewithal to stop and go, is this the thing, or is this an emotive decision? Is this financial? And I imagine that, thank goodness he's a finance guy, because the numbers told him the story at the end.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And yes, I do consider myself to have probably the best in-laws that a guy could ask for. I've been with my wife for a very long time, so I've known him since the late 1990s. He's been in my world, I've been in his. So, and he accepted me. I still remember from the day I met him, I was like, okay, you are now my second. He has one son, one daughter. So you're my third son now. Like literally like a week into this relationship, I'm like 17 years old. We met my wife very young, and he's just like embracing me with open arms and like, really an amazing person. So yes, I had a lot of trust and faith in him. That's absolutely for sure. I think at the same time, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are naive in their early days. I really look back and I hear a lot of stories of the hustle and things that people did. And it's like, wow, that was nuts. Like the fact that you did that and that you thought that would work, where normally like, 99% of the time that would fail. I think, that's something we don't talk a lot about. I think we talk a lot about risk taking and how you have to be brave as an entrepreneur. but I don't think we talk enough about like the naive decisions that worked out in some cases, not all, but in some cases. So I don't like that they take much credit for it. I like to think that, you know what, some way somehow that my father-in-law stopped us from making a bad decision, and then yes, once we took the new decision, then I think my brother-in-law and I, Joey and I, put a lot of heart, soul, blood, sweat, tears into the new business to make it work.
Yeah, there's something interesting this year. One of the mantras that I'm trying to stick with is to follow the path of least expectation. And it's interesting. It's something that I've been trying to figure out where it comes from. And I think you've nailed it, is that entrepreneurial naivety, and coupled with the blind optimism and positivity that entrepreneurs have, in spite of being cynical, most of us, means that we do things that other people think will fail. We do the unexpected things that other people are like, nah, that's never going to work. And you're like, of course, man. Mark Zuckerberg, of course, 1 billion people want to post their Twitter. Where are you now? Of course, people want to do that. It's naive and it's dumb, but it works because it's naive and it's dumb. So it's that path. The path of least expectation is a version of this entrepreneurial naivety that I think you've hit on. Okay, so this all collapses. You don't put the mortgage into this business. I imagine that shareholders kind of go ridiculously apeshit, and like, how I want to know the specifics of the closing down and then the starting up. And it doesn't have to be a long version. I'm just interested in that because not a lot of people get to delist or close a listed company and then go and start something new.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as much as I was whining and crying a few minutes ago on the podcast about having to deal with upset clients and customers, you can imagine what my father-in-law and my brother-in-law and my mother-in-law had to deal with at the highest level of shareholders and people who have put in tens of thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars into this stock, into this company, expecting it to really have massive success. So for them, it was just unbelievable, the type of conversations they had to have. I know it scarred them a little bit for a while, especially from a relationship standpoint. There's a lot of relationships that were broken during that time and that have never been mended, just based on, people not being either accepting or, obviously not being happy with losing their money. So, that part was just super, super, super stressful and really, really disappointing for my family, for my in-laws, more so than me, because like I said, for me it was really more of a customer supplier thing. And then then it's kind of like one by one, naturally, which I think is going to happen in any situation, the partners start turning on you, right? This is what happens. It's first, the kind of the BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, then your main banking partner, and then your other main finance partner, and then your accounting firm, and they all just start one by one kind of turning on you, because now you owe them money, and they also had a lot of expectations with where this thing was going, and kind of the sharks are all circling the water at that point, right? And so like everybody's upset. And then the delisting, it's really like I said, it was a slow burn. It was not an overnight thing. It's just kind of the share price, because it's like more of a penny stock, because it's only like at $1.20. It just starts crashing and going and going and going and lowering until at one point, yes, the delisting just happens because it's just so low. And then an official bankruptcy is called. And then, there was clearly not going to be any takeover, because there was nothing left to take over, really. So no one else could have just come in and bought the overall business. And I don't think anybody wanted to be part of that mess. And so, it was just like a slow burn down to nothing, and bankruptcy is declared. And then, everybody just kind of moves on from you. And then what happened was, a lot of the previous owners of those businesses who had sold to this head office organization, to this public company, they circled back, because they were sharks as well. And they started buying their businesses back. So through 2 or 3 of those companies, entrepreneurs bought their businesses back 10 cents on a dollar and relaunched those businesses again as well. So it's kind of like a weird situation, because it hurts your ego, right? When you're seeing this person that, you paid them, $7 million for their business, and then they come back, 2 years later, 3 years later, and they buy their business back for $800,000. And then they rebuilt it back to another 7 million.
Yeah, that's brutal.
So it's tough to see. To see.
Yeah. But with all of that said, the thing I've been saying for a while, since my first book in 2018, is that failure is not an endpoint; it's a through point. And I think that you are going to tell us that exact thing, is that this failure wasn't an end point for you guys. It was a point of inflection where you decided to lean in, go forward, and learn from what you've just experienced and build something new. So now the sharks have circled, they've taken their chunk. You are all left as a familial unit thinking we've got 3 mortgages on our homes to invest in something. What do we do? And what did you do?
Yeah, so then my brother-in-law and I made a decision to buy back the assets of 3 businesses and relaunch. Now, the thing that people don't tell you about when you do these type of things is now that your name is in the mud, so your name isn't worth anything, right? So banking partners, the entire community is like, screw these 2 young guys. We ain't gonna support them because like they just came out of a bankruptcy, so they're terrible entrepreneurs. They have no idea what they're doing, right? There's not one human being that has any faith in us. Literally, one person showed faith in us. One person, and we don't understand why. And that person was the Home Depot buyer who we were dealing with, a wonderful, wonderful woman who had supported us. And we still don't know to this day how she pulled this off, but she convinced her VP, who hated us because we had screwed them over for 2 years, to give us a second chance and to relaunch with them as our first customer. So June 22nd, 2009. We launched our first order back with Home Depot and with them giving us a second chance. And then we had to get into something called factoring. Have you ever heard of this, Nick?
Yeah.
Factoring? This is not a good thing. So factoring is when you cannot get a bank to support you, right? You have to get some money. Our mortgages weren't enough. I mean, that was just enough to get the ball rolling, but we didn't have enough money to fund all of our inventory and everything that we needed in our growth that we were trying to go after. So we had to use a company. And what they do is that they lend you money at a very high interest rate. So anywhere between like 9 and 12%, as opposed to 2 or 3% from the bank, right? So 9 or 12%. Then they own your receivables and they own your inventory, okay, during that time. And basically what happens is as you sell stuff, they lend you a bit more money at high interest. You buy a bit more stuff, you sell a bit more stuff, and you're back into that initial vicious circle I told you about earlier. But now you're doing it where you are growing, but you're just paying a lot of interest. And it's really, there's almost like, it's almost like a loan sharking thing, right? But it was done in a very clean, legal way with a very good company that's reputable that we have in Montreal. Okay, so this company, they were actually a really great partner. These were the terms. You have to just accept the terms. If you're paying, 10, 12% interest, and they own what you have. But the fun thing about this company is that they almost use it as a launch pad to say, okay, the businesses that are strong enough to survive this, you will eventually get a bank if you do it properly. So they were a launch pad for us to get a bank, but man, was it tough for those first couple of years to really get any finances going, because you can't really do much because you're paying so much interest on all of your loans.
How did you find this business? I mean, how did you guys even come up with the idea to go to like a second kind of strange loan shark that uses your inventory as collateral to the loan at a high interest rate, and then go, screw it, this is going to work, let's plow all of our money into it? Like, you feel like it's batshit crazy looking back on it?
It is. I look at most of what we did. I was like, what were we doing? Like, what the hell were we doing? I could have gone and made like 150K at like working for Rubbermaid, Basically, you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice because you go to the bank, and then you go to the next bank, and you go to the next bank, and you go to the next bank, and every bank says no. And then you go to like the BDC and they're like, are you crazy? You guys just screwed us over for bankruptcy. So we're not helping you. So we went to every single partner, that normal partner, and every single one said no to us. And then someone at that point, I can't even remember who, when, how, or what, someone told us, you guys have to go through factoring. Like you don't have a choice here. You're going to have to go factoring because you can't get a bank. And there's no way you can fund your own inventory and receivables. And so they introduced us to this company. And this company actually was a young guy. Our account manager was a super nice guy, very professional. And they were a real setup. They had a real, it was a real company setup. It wasn't anything, we weren't in the back alleys or in an underground basement somewhere.
It's not the mob.
With blindfolds, with blindfolds going in. And they had a system, and they said, listen, it's going to cost you a lot, but the way your business is set up, if you keep bringing in sales, you'll make enough money to pay us our interest, and you'll make excess money over that. And once the bank sees a couple of financial statements, like 2 years of financial statements, you need to get 2 years. 1 year won't do it. Once you have 2 full years of financial statements, you'll go see a bank and they'll look at your numbers and they'll give you a line of credit. I mean, and it was right.
Aside from the insane interest rates, you've just kind of nailed down the fundamentals of every business. Have a good product, make sales, and do it for 2 years, and you very likely have a real business.
Exactly. They needed proof of concept. They needed proof that we could even run a business the right way. This company had zero risk because the day that we went bankrupt the second time, they would just own our receivables, sell the receivables, collect our receivables, sell the inventory, and move on. And they would have not lost a penny because they made a lot of high interest money in there as well. And we had like guarantees coming through the ears and nose and head and neck and all kinds of things. So we were we were really tied into this thing. But they were right. Once we had a good product at a good margin, we were delivering, executing, shipping on time, making sure we're meeting deadlines. Then yes, at that point, bank, I'll mention it, TD Bank for anybody who knows it. They're my bank for everything because they're just such a great supporter of ours. They when they saw the numbers, they said, "Yeah, you guys have 2 years now, it makes sense, and here's a line of credit." And then we left Brome with literally handshake, pat on the back, thank you, thank you. You guys did what you needed for us. We did what we needed for you. Great relationship, and we walked away.
What a wild ride. What a wild ride.
It's not over yet.
I was going to say, it's not over. We're now leaning into the second near business death experience. So I mean, how do we go from 2 years in, the loan sharks, not loan sharks, the factoring has worked out well. You've got 2 years, a bank behind you, customers, new products. What happens next?
So now we're feeling good about ourselves, right, Nick? Now is when you get into a little cocky stage.
And I was going to say,
cocky phase
that's
now.
the problem. The second you start to feel good about yourself.
We start feeling a little good about ourselves. We start patting ourselves on the back. I change barbers, go to a nicer barber. Everything starts feeling good about my life. I think I've made it. Life is great. It's amazing, Then literally a few months after the factoring, the bank comes on board. We're all happy. We literally are starting to feel really good about ourselves. We're like, wow, we are two young entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs. We know what we're doing. The non-compete ends for the companies that were in the previous businesses. And we bought back companies, right, that were owned by previous very intelligent business owners. And so I remember this day perfectly. My daughter was 4 years old. I'm at a shopping center with her. At the end of the day, I had to go pick her up from school, and she wanted a muffin. So I was, I'm gonna go buy you a muffin. So I'm walking with my beautiful 4-year-old daughter, and my partner calls me, and he says, "You have your phone?" I'm like, "Yeah." Phones were just, we could start looking at links and things like that on our phone at that point. Where I was like 2013. We were starting to get a little more mobile. He says, "Go on this website," and I go on the website, and there on this website are the exact same 200 products from our product line on this website, all priced at $1 less than what we charge for our products. And they're the same. It's like the same pictures, like the same catalog. So I'm like, oh, it's like someone just copied our catalog and they just put it on online. Like, this is just weird. He's like, no. He's like, it's the previous, and he tells me I will not mention names. He says it's X, Y, and Z. These three guys have relaunched their business, and they're coming after us head on directly using, by the way, Nick, the same suppliers. So the exact same suppliers. So the suppliers at this point have been dealing with them for about 6 months now without telling us, right? So they haven't told us a thing, and they're going to the market with the same clients. So at that moment when I hang up with my brother-in-law, it's a key in the door moment. So for me, him and I think we literally was like, these guys are smarter, more experienced. They're older. They know what they're doing.
It's over.
Let's just maybe we just close shop. Maybe we just key in the door, liquidate what we have, and how are we gonna survive this? These guys are 5 times better than us. And I know it's this cheesy thing to say, Nick, but it was the absolute best thing that ever happened to us, by far. Best thing that ever happened to us in our history of our business in the last 12 years.
Unpack that for me.
So when you get copied that way by someone else, the first thing that comes to mind is, wait a second. If someone can just copy our products with the same suppliers and come into the same market as us, what the hell is different and unique about us as a business? Do we even have a business? What is our business? Because if tomorrow morning you can go do that, right, Nick? If you could just go copy some products, launch them in market, and be successful. I mean, if it's that easy, then why isn't everybody doing it, right? It should just be piece of pie. But it's not, because running a business is hard, and running a successful business is 10 times harder than just running a regular business. So it made us realize, you know what? Screw this and screw them. Like, you want to take us on? Like, this is your game? This is what you're going to do? Well, let's go. It's on, baby. And so what we actually did as a strategy is that we did two big things. First, we decided to revamp our entire business. We said, you know what? If our business can be that easy to copy, we need to change. So that was the first time we went all in with LED technology. So LED technology didn't really exist in 2013. It existed for lights when you get to in your car and you get to a light and a stop and things like that. And there were some functions for emergency lighting and things, but it wasn't mainstream. You couldn't go to a store and buy like an LED light yet. So we had already seen the technology and said, we're going to go all in with LED lighting. And that was a big risk, huge risk to do that, because it was expensive and no one really knew about the technology yet. And the second big decision we made was that we read the Rockefeller Habits from Vern Harnish, and we hired a business coach. And we hired a business coach that had no clients. Okay. And the only reason we hired her was because she could speak French, and our company was very French, and she was the only French business coach that knew how to do the Rockefeller Habits. And she was cheap because she had no clients. So it didn't cost a lot. So the combination of being cheap and speaking French, we're like, all right, sign her up. We're going to do this thing. And it was one of the best decisions we ever made. And she's actually one of the best business coaches in the world today. And so we hired her, and yeah, we went all in. Instead of, moping around and being upset and saying, what are we going to do? We went into full attack mode, and it completely transformed our business. Completely.
It's so interesting you mentioned that book. I reference that book once a month, once every 2 months. If you haven't read it, The Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish is a cracker of a book. It explains basic understanding of how you should structure reporting and lines and strategy and all sorts of interesting pieces of information that good old John D. Rockefeller implemented in his rise to masses of money. And I'm a fan. The basic premises are just so unique and interesting. So how long ago was it that you hired the business coach, and how long after that? Go ahead.
Sorry, yes, that was in 2013.
Okay.
So that was the when we launched with her.
Okay. And then how long after that did things start to change?
So it was really interesting, because what happens when you start implementing the Rockefeller Habits, which is now called scaling up, and I think, as you know, I'm actually a scaling up coach now. That's how passionate I am about it. You get some really big wins at first, usually pretty quickly. And then it's just discipline, routine, focus, alignment, and things just start happening if you follow the process. Just trust the process. I know this is a cheesy line that we hear in sports, we hear it everywhere. If you trust the process, you just do what you're supposed to do and follow the methodology, you will have instant results. So I'll give you an example. When we started this, we said, okay, let's have our first kickoff meeting. So she said, we're going to have this 2-day meeting and we're going to do some strategic planning. We had done a little bit, my partner and I, because we come from EO, both of us. So we had already heard about, building some values and, doing a few things, but she was really kicking us off in our strategic planning. As many entrepreneurs, the two of us went in there with very fixed and stubborn ideas. We went into the meeting thinking we need to hire some, salespeople, a VP sales, and we need to become the administrators of the business and let salespeople run our entire sales division, because, that's kind of where we are in our career path right now. As soon as we left those two meetings, we realized the exact opposite. What came to the forefront was that, wait a second, Joey and Shawn, you're the two absolute best salespeople in this business. You need to be selling and bringing in revenue, and you need to hire people to run the business, not be stuck in the day-to-day. And so it forced us to, not forced us, but we wanted to, made us hire a controller, a head of product development, and then we put in place a director of operations. These people then run the business. We were still very involved, but we were spending a lot of time on the road. So, that's the type of thing that strategic planning will do for you. You're going to go in there and say, we're going to do things a certain way. But when you start talking out as a team, you start really analyzing your org chart, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, And that was, again, another like small but highly important decision that we made, because we didn't bring in our VP sales until 2020.
Hmm.
Just to get that to you in perspective,
Hmm.
for 7 years, my partner and I grew the business to well into the eight figures, just based on him and I out there working the market, working our contacts, working our industry. And that was like, again, another amazing decision. I think we would have failed pretty miserably had we brought in some type of sales manager.
But it is such a key observation from an entrepreneurial perspective. The imposter syndrome is quite insidious and it sticks with you as an entrepreneur, especially much like you. I'm not a formally trained entrepreneur at all. I just built stuff. And you constantly think there's got to be someone better at this. There's got to be an entrepreneur who's better than me at this. There's got to be an operator better than me at this, a salesperson better than me at this. But the truth is, if there was, they would be doing it. So the key point that I'm kind of figuring out myself is, do you want to focus on your strengths and double down there? Or do you want to focus on your weaknesses and make them better? And I think that it's a combination and a constant seesaw. But at the time, yourself and your brother-in-law were like, fuck it, the best way to do this is to double down on what we know how to do and let somebody else do everything else. And it's a trap that most entrepreneurs fall into, is that, oh, I'm the founder, CEO, I must do everything. No, you can't scale yourself. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's a really great point you're bringing, Nick. It's something that we debate a lot in the scaling up community. Actually, one of the questions on our first scaling up assessment that we sent every new client is the entrepreneur head of sales? Because it's literally the only relationship you usually see, is that the entrepreneur is the head of sales, and scaling up in its structure says that's not a good thing. And I'm kind of, have my own viewpoints on it. I say, well, it depends. It's maybe not a good thing, but maybe it's an amazing thing. Maybe it's a really great thing, because if you're going to be really amazing at sales and customer facing, the problem only comes in if you're trying to do, like you said, too many things. If you're trying to be head of finance and head of engineering, head of product at the same time, well, you're going to fail. But if you have some other really smart people around you and you are the customer facing representative of the business, I don't see a problem with it. I really don't. I think it's wildly important for a strong CEO who's got a sales background to be the face of the business. Why not?
Yeah, I suppose it's a matter of self-awareness. If you are self-aware enough to know, hold on, I'm not the best salesperson here, I can barely speak to myself in the mirror, never mind a customer, then maybe you hand off sales. But if you are the sales face, you've been doing it for 2, 3, 4 years, then removing yourself might not be the best option. But it is about dropping that ego and being aware that maybe you're not the best, or maybe you are the best. Okay, so
Absolutely.
what I want to discuss, which we've kind of not gotten into amazingly an hour into this, is the seesaws of emotion and mental health here. Because we've condensed 15 years of emotional train wreck entrepreneurialism. And I say that from a point of experience, that it is a train wreck. You now have got your emotional support is your partner, your wife, your family who are in business with you. So how do you kind of how does Shawn manage mental health? Like, what were the lowest lows and how have you coped with them?
So I coped with this in a very specific way that is completely foreign to me, which I know it might sound very bizarre, but I started writing. And I'm not a writer. I've never by any ways. I studied a little bit of script writing. I studied documentary filmmaking in university, and I did a little bit of script writing, but I'm not by nature, by passion, a writer. But I needed an avenue to get out, kind of my anger, my frustrations, and my visions of what I was doing from a day-to-day basis. And so, what would happen was my wife, falls asleep a little bit earlier than me. So she usually falls asleep around 9:30 at night. And every night I'd go up into my office, and for about 30 minutes, I would just write. And then it started becoming a story. So I was really passionate about Robin Sharma and about Patrick Lencioni and, so the books they've written, The Ideal Team Player and the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. So I just started writing a story. And it was all about, a guy who's really unhappy and he treats his family like crap and he doesn't do that well at work and he's kind of past his prime and he's out of shape now. And his life is going nowhere, as many, many people kind of feel, in general, when they get to certain points in their lives. And then he just meets somebody who kind of brings him back on this path of righteousness and this path of self-awareness and self-motivation. And it took me 8 years, and you for those who are going to see this on video, but there's like a little book in my background screen here. That's the book. It's called The Happy Leader. And it really came from my own personal experience and also my experience of being surrounded with entrepreneurs like yourself in EO who every time I meet them, we do the best examples when we do our one word open, right? We meet once a month, and every time we meet, we do a one word open. And the words that come out from this one word open are stressed, burnt out, unhappy, tired, overwhelmed. It's always the same type of words. And I started thinking, wow, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but every entrepreneur I know just wants to sell their business and sail off into the sunset. So I'm like, what is happening here? There is like a real disconnect. And then the biggest message that I understood from all of it is that every time I talk to people, I always get the same answer. I will be happy when. I will be happy when I sell. I will be happy when I bring in that new VP. I will be happy when I land that new client. But then those things come and go, and you're actually not happier. So I've been on a lifelong quest for happiness, and I don't know if you're aware of this, Nick, but my Shawns, my second name, my real name, Sukraj, is an Indian name, and it actually means the happy leader. That's actually what it means. And that's the name of the book that I decided to write. My grandmother named me that way. And I've just been obsessed with happiness and helping entrepreneurs kind of achieve that ever since.
One of my favorite quotes is, wherever you go, there you are. It doesn't matter if you have a new VP. It doesn't matter if you sell your business. If you are fundamentally, inherently, and deeply sad, you will not be happy when you reach those milestones. Most of the unhappy people I know are the wealthiest. Like,
I agree with you.
It's just the way it is. And it's an internal struggle, not an external one.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that. So yeah, it took me a while to get through it, but that was the basis of the book.
What a fantastic way, and one that resonates with me deeply, to deal with your mental health. I've been a writer since I can remember, 7, 8 years old. It's all I've ever done. I studied writing and journalism. It's what I practiced. Being an entrepreneur was actually secondary to me being a writer when I was younger. So it resonates with me, and I get it. Like that verbalizing out of your brain onto a piece of paper, your fears, your concerns, your worries, your stresses. There's something magical to writing them down, makes them tangible and then less important in your head. It's the anticipation in your brain that makes the fears worse than the actuality of those things coming to life. So writing them down makes so much sense to me. You're the first person to ever say that to me.
It made a world of difference. Yeah, and then and the other concepts that I bring out in the book have a lot to do with what I've learned along the way from many mentors and many incredible people. How to visualize, true visualization, how to meditate, get into breathing, how to surpass expectations. I push people, I encourage people to push themselves physically beyond their limits, because a lot of people don't push themselves far enough, and the confidence that comes with that, I think, makes a huge difference. So that would have been my second avenue, where I started running marathons, I started doing triathlons, just to make sure that I was
I just mentioned that in passing. Just mention that in passing. It's the marathons and the triathlons as an extra to the writing.
No, but honestly, like anybody in the world could do a marathon or a triathlon. It really doesn't take a special skill. If you just go and start running, and you just run like a little bit more every week, you'll run a marathon. I'm certainly not breaking any records, so I don't put much credit into that. And I used it more as an avenue to get stress out of my system. And it's funny, now that I'm coaching, 25 or so companies around the world, I bring in these techniques into our strategic planning, and I'm telling you, people find this thing so weird, Nick. So I'll literally do like a Wim Hof, breathing technique. For those of your audience, if you don't know him, check him out, Wim Hof. I'll literally do that at 3 p.m. and go outside in the Canada winter, and it's like -10, and they're like, "What are we doing?" And I'm like, "We're going to go and do 4 minutes of breathing and breath holding," and they're like,
push breathing.
"Have you lost your mind?" It's minus, and I'm like, "Trust me, we'll go do it." And then you're going to come back and we're going to have a lot of energy, because if not, you're going to fall asleep for the last hour and a half, which is always what happens in these meetings. So, and I teach people how to visualize. I teach them how to do true meditation and things like that. So stretching during, the actual sessions. So I'm trying to bring in this core element of kind of physical and mental self-awareness that you mentioned earlier into business. Because if you can integrate that into your business life and your business world and with your teams, everybody will be that much better off.
Yeah. This theme is incredibly one that comes up often on this podcast. In the very first episode, one of the guests was Stilly Charalambous. Similar name, not exactly the same. If you haven't listened to that one, go listen to that. But Stilly talks very vulnerably about the rise of his business and the link to his personal development, that the two things mimic each other almost exactly, that the more he got to grips with the trauma he'd experienced in his life, the more he dealt with that, the better his business was doing. And we often try and separate work and life. And I've always found it to be such a laughable idea, being an entrepreneur since I was 16, that, oh, you've got work and then you've got life. I'm like, no, no, no. All I do is work. My life is my work. Those things are intimately tied because in my brain, they exist simultaneously. So the separation of those things has never made sense to me. It's more like finding the way to get them to work together makes more sense. So everything you've said just resonates so deeply with me. Now, before we give you the floor to tell people where they can find you and follow you and learn from you and hire you and buy from you, I want to ask you what you've learned that you take with you everywhere you go from these 2 near-death experiences.
So number one, which I did mention, but I just really want to emphasize it again. So many people that I see launch businesses, right? We see so many businesses, a lot of which fail, and you base your launching of your business on a great idea or a great service that you have, or an order. You get an order for something, and you're like, wait a sec, this is a business, and then you just start trying to run with it. The problem is that if you haven't built the foundation of your business, if you haven't figured out why you exist, where you're headed, your core values, the type of people you want within this business, it's probably either going to fail or you're going to need to get to it eventually, and then you're going to regret not having done it early. So for me, it's make sure that your business fundamentals are sound, build that foundation the right way. Strategic planning, it's never too early to do it. So just make sure that you're planning out your vision, like you should do in your own personal life as well. So to me, I would say that's, number one. And then number two is mental health comes first. So make sure that you're taking care of your, not just mental, your holistic health. So your mind, body, soul, it comes first. If you don't have that right, if you don't feel energized, if you don't feel like motivated, excited every single day when you wake up, it's going to be very hard to be successful, whether in your business career and or as an entrepreneur. So just mind yourself before anything else.
Yeah, that last one I think is so key to everything I've ever built. That I called it the sacrifice fallacy. It's the idea that you can sacrifice your mental and physical health and still build something amazing is a fallacy. You need to put yourself at the top of your priority list. That fallacy is there because the hustle porn, we all tell each other that we can work 20-hour days, 20 days in a row, and the work is still good, and it's not. It's a fallacy. So don't fall for it. Okay, so now in closing, tell people everything you want to share with them. Where can they find you? Where can they buy your book? What do you want to tell them? The floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, anybody who wants to reach out to me, just email me at Shawn@elevationleaders.com. Go to the website, elevationleaders.com. The book is on Amazon, The Happy Leader. It's very easy to find. There's no other books named that way, so you'll see it there. And then also with LinkedIn, you and I are both very active on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn, Shawn Johal. I'm the only one there. We can connect and have a chat. So I remain 100% available for anybody who wants to discuss anything further.
Amazing. Shawn, thank you for the vulnerability, for the 2 incredible stories. And I'm so excited to know that for you and your family business, it's not over.
Well, thanks for having me, Nick. The experience has been amazing, and I'm wishing you the best of luck. I know this is going to be a very successful podcast.
Thank you, Shawn.